The rain battered the tin roof of the Pine Hollow Animal Shelter, a relentless drumbeat that seemed to echo the despair within its cinder-block walls. Inside, amidst the chorus of whines and meows, a bobcat named Sable crouched in a too-small cage, her amber eyes glinting with a defiance that hadn't yet been snuffed out. Her tawny fur was matted, streaked with grime from the muddy ditch where she'd been found, half-starved and snarling. Her left hind leg twisted at an unnatural angle. The shelter staff, overworked and underfunded, had already made their decision. Euthanasia by morning. Sable's fate seemed sealed, another casualty of a world too busy to care. But Sable wasn't alone in that storm-soaked night. Across town, in a cluttered apartment above a shuttered bookstore, Nora Callahan sat hunched over her laptop, her fingers hovering above the keys. At 34, Nora was a woman adrift, her dreams of becoming a wildlife biologist buried beneath a decade of dead-end jobs and unpaid bills. Her only solace was her blog, Whispers of the Wild, where she poured her heart into stories of forgotten creatures, though her readership barely scraped 100. Tonight, her phone buzzed with an alert from a local animal rescue group, a blurry photo of a bobcat, its eyes piercing through the pixelated gloom, and a single line, scheduled for euthanasia unless claimed by 8 a.m. Nora's breath caught. She'd seen bobcats in the wild once, years ago, during a college field trip to the Smoky Mountains. The memory of their silent grace, their untamed ferocity, had never left her. She glanced at the clock, 11:47 p.m. The shelter was a 40-minute drive through the storm. Reason screamed at her to stay put. She had no permit, no space, no money for a wild animal's care. But something deeper, something primal, stirred within her. She grabbed her keys. The shelter was a fortress of flickering fluorescence and damp concrete when Nora burst through the doors, her raincoat dripping pools onto the floor. The night attendant, a weary man named Carl, looked up from his crossword. "You're here for the bobcat?" he asked, skepticism etching his brow. Nora nodded, her voice steady despite the tremor in her chest. "I'm taking her." Carl led her to the cage, where Sable lay coiled like a spring, her gaze locked on Nora. The bobcat's leg was worse than Nora had imagined, the bone protruding beneath the skin. Yet Sable's low growl held no fear, only a challenge. "She's not gonna make it," Carl warned, handing Nora a clipboard of waiver forms. "Vet said the leg's too far gone, and she's half feral." "You sure about this?" Nora wasn't sure. She wasn't sure of anything except the pull in her gut, the certainty that letting Sable die would haunt her forever. She signed the forms, her hands shaking, and watched as Carl sedated the bobcat for transport. Sable's eyes never left Nora's, even as the tranquilizer took hold, her lids drooping but her spirit unyielding. Back at her apartment, Nora turned her cramped living room into a makeshift sanctuary. She cleared books from a corner, laid down a tarp, and set up a dog crate lined with blankets. Sable, still groggy, hissed softly as Nora eased her into the crate, but she didn't strike. The rain had stopped, and moonlight spilled through the window, casting silver stripes across Sable's fur. Nora sat cross-legged on the floor, watching the bobcat breathe, her mind racing. She needed a vet, a rehab plan, a miracle. Her savings were a joke, and her landlord would evict her if he found a wild predator in her apartment. But as Sable stirred, her claws flexing against the blanket, Nora felt a spark of purpose she hadn't known in years. By dawn, Nora had emailed every wildlife rehabber she knew, begging for help. Most didn't reply. Those who did cited regulations, costs, or Sable's slim odds. Desperate, Nora posted Sable's story on her blog, pouring out every detail. The bobcat's fierce eyes, the storm, the race against time. She included a PayPal link, a long shot, but she was out of options. She didn't expect much. Her blog had never gone viral, never even come close. But the internet is a strange beast, as unpredictable as the wild itself. By noon, Nora's post had been shared 1,000 times. By evening, 10,000. Comments flooded in, some skeptical, some awestruck, many with donations. A retired vet in Chattanooga offered to operate on Sable's leg for free. A wildlife sanctuary in North Carolina promised a temporary home if Nora could get Sable stable. Strangers sent blankets, food, even a heated mat for the crate. Nora stared at her screen, tears blurring the pixels, as the PayPal balance climbed past $5,000. Sable's surgery was scheduled for the next day. The vet, Dr. Hargrove, was a gruff woman with hands steady as stone. "No promises," she said, examining Sable's x-rays. "The leg's a mess, and infections likely. But she's a fighter." Nora nodded, her throat tight, and stayed in the waiting room, scrolling through her blog's comments to keep from unraveling. One stood out, anonymous, no profile picture. "Be careful. Not everyone cheering you on wants you to succeed." Nora frowned, dismissing it as a troll. But as she drove Sable home post-surgery, the Bobcat groggy but alive, that comment gnawed at her. The street outside her apartment was quiet, too quiet, and a shadow moved behind her neighbor's truck. She shook it off, paranoia, she told herself. She had enough to worry about. Sable's recovery, the sanctuary transfer, the sudden spotlight on her blog. Yet as she carried Sable's crate inside, a chill crept up her spine, as if the storm had followed her home. Upstairs, Sable stirred, her bandaged leg twitching. Nora knelt beside the crate, whispering, "We're in this together, girl." The Bobcat's eyes opened, slits of amber in the dim light, and for the first time, Sable didn't growl. Instead, she stretched, her claws grazing the blanket, and settled into a wary truce. Nora smiled, exhaustion mingling with hope. But outside, in the alley below, a figure lingered, their phone's screen glowing with Nora's blog, their fingers typing a message that would change everything. The days after Sable's surgery were a tightrope walk over a chasm of uncertainty. Nora's apartment, once a haven of quiet chaos, now thrummed with purpose. The living room was a fortress of care. Pill bottles lined the coffee table. A whiteboard tracked Sable's meds and feeding schedule, and the dog crate, now padded with donated fleece, stood as a throne for the recovering Bobcat. Sable, though weakened, was no less regal. Her amber eyes followed Nora's every move, sharp as a blade, but the growls had softened into low rumbles, a grudging acknowledgement of their pact. Nora barely slept. Between administering antibiotics, coaxing Sable to eat, and updating her blog, she was a woman possessed. Whispers of the Wild had exploded, its follower count ticking past 50,000. The story of Sable, her brush with death, her improbable rescue, had caught fire, shared by influencers, picked up by local news, even trending on X with #SavesAble. Donations poured in, enough to cover Sable's care and fund her transfer to the North Carolina sanctuary. But with the spotlight came shadows. The anonymous comment Nora had dismissed lingered in her mind. "Be careful. Not everyone cheering you on wants you to succeed." She noticed it first in the comments section. Amid the outpouring of support, a few barbs appeared. Accusations that Nora was exploiting Sable for clout, claims she was unfit to care for a wild animal. Then came the emails, venomous and precise, questioning her credentials, her motives, her right to intervene. One, sent from a burner address, read, "You're playing with fire. Bobcats belong in the wild, not your apartment." Nora's stomach churned, but she told herself it was the price of visibility. Trolls thrived on attention. She blocked the senders and moved on. Sable's recovery, at least, was a beacon. Dr. Hargrove called it a miracle. The infection had receded, and Sable was putting weight on her leg, her movements stiff but determined. Nora filmed short clips for her blog, capturing Sable's tentative steps, her sudden pounces on a feather toy. Each post drew thousands of likes, but also more scrutiny. A wildlife official contacted her, warning that keeping Sable without a permit was illegal. Nora explained the sanctuary plan, but the official's tone was clipped. "Get her out of your home by next week, or we'll seize her." Panic clawed at Nora's chest. The sanctuary wasn't ready yet. They needed 2 more weeks to prepare a suitable enclosure. She pleaded for an extension, but the official was unmoved. That night, Nora sat beside Sable's crate, her laptop open to a draft blog post begging for help. Sable, sensing her distress, pressed her nose against the crate's bars, her breath warm and steady. Nora reached through, her fingers brushing Sable's fur. A fleeting connection that grounded her. She hit publish. The response was immediate. Supporters rallied, flooding the wildlife office with calls and emails. A local lawyer offered pro bono help, drafting a temporary permit application. By morning, the official relented, granting Nora the 2 weeks. Relief washed over her, but it was short-lived. That afternoon, she found a note taped to her apartment door. "You can't save her. Stop trying." The handwriting was jagged, the paper damp from the drizzle outside. Nora's hands shook as she locked her door, her eyes darting to the alley below. Nothing, just the glint of wet pavement. She didn't tell anyone about the note. Not Dr. Hargrove, not her few friends, not the lawyer. Fear was a private thing, and Nora had learned long ago to carry it alone. Instead, she threw herself into Sable's care, spending hours researching bobcat behavior, building a makeshift enrichment area with logs and ropes. Sable thrived, her strength returning in leaps. One evening, Nora left the crate open, testing Sable's trust. The bobcat stepped out, her gait uneven but proud, and curled up on the sofa, her eyes half closed in a rare moment of peace. Nora's heart swelled. She snapped a photo, captioned it "Sable's first sofa slumber," and posted it. The internet melted. Hashtag Sable on the sofa trended for hours. But the shadows grew longer. 2 days before Sable's transfer, Nora woke to a shattered window. Glass littered her living room, and a brick lay on the tarp. A word scrawled in red marker: "Thief." Sable, unharmed but agitated, hissed from her crate. Nora called the police, her voice steady despite the tremor in her bones. The officer took a report, but his shrug spoke volumes. "No witnesses, no cameras, no leads. Probably kids," he said. Nora didn't believe it. The emails, the note, the brick. They were connected, a noose tightening around her. She confided in Dr. Hargrove, who urged her to move Sable early. "Someone's fixated," the vet said, her eyes grave. "You're not safe." Nora resisted. She'd promised Sable a proper goodbye, but when she found her car's tires slashed the next morning, she relented. The sanctuary agreed to take Sable that night. Nora packed the crate, her throat tight, and drove through a fog-choked dusk. Sable's soft rumbles the only sound in the car. The sanctuary was a sprawling haven of pines and meadows, its enclosures designed for animals like Sable. The director, a kind-eyed woman named Lena, promised daily updates. Nora knelt by the crate one last time, her fingers tracing Sable's fur. "You're home, girl," she whispered. Sable's eyes met hers, fierce and unyielding. Then she stepped into her new enclosure, vanishing into the underbrush. Nora drove back to Pine Hollow, tears blurring the road, unaware of the car trailing her, its headlights dimmed. Back home, Nora's apartment felt hollow. She sat on the sofa, Sable's photo still open on her phone, and opened her blog to write a final post. But her inbox pinged with a new email, no subject, from an address she didn't recognize. Attached was a single photo, Sable in her cage at the shelter, the night Nora had claimed her. The message read, "You stole her from me. Now I take something of yours." Nora's blood ran cold. She locked her doors, checked the windows, her pulse hammering. The police were useless without evidence, and the sanctuary was too far to check on Sable tonight. She scrolled through her blog's analytics, searching for clues, and froze. One IP address had visited her site daily, sometimes hourly, since Sable's story broke. It was local, too local. Her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "Look outside." She didn't. Instead, she grabbed a kitchen knife and hid in the bathroom, her breath shallow. The storm had returned, rain lashing the windows, masking any sounds from the alley. Hours passed, or maybe minutes, time blurred in the grip of fear. Then, a knock. Soft, deliberate. Nora clutched the knife, her mind racing. Friend? Foe? She crept to the door, peering through the peephole. No one. Just a package, small and sodden, on her doorstep. She waited until dawn to retrieve it, her nerves frayed. Inside was a collar, leather and worn, engraved with a single word. Sable. A note fluttered out. She was mine first. Nora's knees buckled. Someone had known Sable before the shelter, before the ditch, before Nora. Someone who'd lost her or let her go. And now they wanted her back. Nora didn't sleep that day. She called Lena, who confirmed Sable was safe, her enclosure secure. But Nora's relief was fleeting. Her blog, her sanctuary, her fight for Sable. It had awakened something, someone, who saw her not as a savior but a thief. As she sat on the sofa, Sable's photo glowing on her screen, Nora realized the story wasn't over. The Bobcat was safe, slumbering in her new home. But Nora? She was still in the wild, and the hunter was closing in.